So, what can an engineering report from 2007, before the first iPhone even existed, what can that possibly teach us about the buildings we use every single day? Well, as it turns out, a whole lot. The lessons in these old archives are, believe it or not, just as critical today as they were back then. And today we're going to dig in and unlock them.
Okay, so the document we're diving into today is the fifth newsletter from Cross. It was published way back in January 2007. And, the whole idea for this explainer actually came from engineer Fairuzi. He had this brilliant thought. What if we used AI to make these valuable archives, especially the older ones, way more accessible? Not just to the public, but specifically for structural and civil engineers. It's all about connecting the past with the future of safety.
All right, so here's what we've got on tap. First, we'll talk about why sharing mistakes is so important. Then, we're jumping into 3 case studies right from the report. One about a total breakdown in communication, another on dangers you'd never see coming, and a really tough one about an engineer's ethical test. And we'll wrap it all up by asking, are we still making these same mistakes today?
Okay, let's get into it. First up, unlocking engineering's past. We're about to see how a document from 2007 can speak so clearly to the challenges we face right now.
So you gotta ask, how do we actually learn from what's happened before? Well, it all starts with the whole mission behind this newsletter. It's this idea that we have to share our mistakes, our close calls, our concerns. Because, one person's lesson learned can literally prevent the next person's disaster. And the organization making this happen is Cross. That's Confidential Reporting on Structural Safety. The concept is pretty simple, but honestly, it was revolutionary. They wanted to create a safe space, a confidential one, where engineers could talk about problems they've seen without getting blamed for it. The goal was never to point fingers. It was all about learning, so the entire industry could get better. Now, this idea didn't just come out of nowhere. It was actually based on this super successful system in the aviation world called ASRS. NASA's been running it since the 70s. And get this, over 750,000 reports. That system totally changed the game for aviation safety. So the goal for Cross was to do that exact same life-saving work, but for construction and engineering. And this is the secret sauce, right? This is why a system like this actually works. It all comes down to building a culture of trust. You can't be judgmental. You have to be an honest broker for everybody involved. You need everyone on board. And this is key. You've got to take all that data, figure out what it means, and then share those lessons back with everyone. It's like a big feedback loop for learning. Okay, let's dive into our first case study. This is such a classic example of what goes wrong when that chain of responsibility just breaks down on a project. We'll call this one the case of the failing lintels. So check out how this whole thing just snowballs. It starts simple. An engineer specifies some steel lintels. Then the contractor asks to use a different product. A supplier then chooses what they think is an equivalent lintel, but here's the fatal flaw. Step 4. They do it all without talking to the original engineer. And what happens? The new lintels buckle, the masonry starts cracking, and boom, the entire project gets shut down for 10 weeks for major repairs. One tiny unauthorized change caused this huge mess. And the lesson here, it couldn't be clearer. The commentary from Cross back in '07 just nails it. And it's as true today as it was then. You just don't make unauthorized changes. The person who designed it, they have to be the one to say if a change is okay. It's really that simple, and it's absolutely critical. All right, our next couple of cases are all about dangers that are quite literally hiding in plain sight. We're talking about things you and I walk past every single day, like balustrades in the fronts of buildings that can turn into a huge risk if they're not done right. So the report gives us 2 really different examples of this. In one case, you've got this flimsy wooden balustrade in a showroom that was just screwed into a chipboard floor. That's just asking for trouble. Then, on the other hand, you have a brand new fancy steel and glass one that looked like it had zero engineering design behind it. And in both situations, it took an engineer who was paying attention to step in and say, whoa, this isn't safe. It just goes to show you the danger can pop up in old buildings and in brand new ones. And there's this great little detail in the report that I just love. The engineer who flagged that second balustrade, he said he was watching some TV cop show, The Bill, I think it was, and there was a scene where a balustrade in a nightclub collapsed. And that's what made it click for him, the real terrifying consequences. Kind of funny, right? Sometimes it takes a fake disaster on TV to stop a real one from happening. And it's not just guardrails. Get this. Another case talks about huge granite panels just falling off the second story of a building. No warning at all. And the cause? It was something hidden deep inside the wall. Steel lintels had been slowly, silently rusting away for years. As they corroded, they expanded and just popped the heavy stone panels right off the facade. Incredible. Okay, so this next case, this one is probably the most serious in the entire report. We're moving past simple mistakes or things people overlooked. This one gets into a really serious ethical situation for an engineer. It's about knowing something is fundamentally wrong and deciding what you're going to do about it.
So, before we jump in, let's do a quick one-on-one on what engineers call overall stability. Just think of it like this. It's what keeps a building from getting pushed over by sideways forces, like a big gust of wind. It's a super basic, fundamental part of safe design. To make it work, you need special, strong walls, or racking walls, to keep the whole thing from twisting or falling apart.
Okay, so here's what happened. A checking engineer is looking at a design for a timber frame building, and they spot a huge problem. The outside walls have so many doors and windows that they're just not strong enough on their own. The original designer tried to fix this by using some of the internal walls for stability. But, and this is the killer mistake, those internal walls weren't tied down properly. There was nothing to stop them from sliding or even lifting up. The bottom line, the buildings were potentially dangerous.
And then you get to this line in the report. And honestly, it just stops you cold. When the checker called out the problem, the original designer basically admitted it. Admitted the design couldn't be justified by the numbers. But then he said that his client didn't want to change it unless a checking engineer caught the mistake. Let that sink in. He knew the design was bad, but submitted it anyway. It's like he was rolling the dice with people's safety.
And as you can imagine, the official commentary from Cross on this was decisive. They said if something is known to be questionable, it cannot be left unresolved. It's not just, a bad day at the office. This crosses a major line. They said it could be seen as negligent. That right there, that's the ethical line you just do not cross.
So, looking back at these stories from 2007, from more than a decade and a half ago, you have to wonder, are we still making these same mistakes? Let's talk for a minute about why this whole idea of reporting is still so incredibly important. I mean, the payoff for doing this is just huge. It's how you stop these stories we just talked about from happening again and again. When people share what went wrong, it creates this shared library of wisdom that you just can't get from a textbook. And yeah, it helps lower costs, but it's so much more than that. It's about making the entire profession smarter, stronger, and at the end of the day, a whole lot safer for everyone. And that really brings us to the final question, doesn't it? This newsletter is from 2007, but the stories, a broken chain of command, dangers hiding in plain sight, an engineer crossing an ethical line, they don't feel old at all, do they? They feel like they could have happened last week. So I'll just leave you with this. Are these same near misses still happening all around us, but in silence?